You are looking at the wrong map. When you picture a nuclear target list, your brain likely conjures up a grainy Cold War era projection. You see red dots over missile silos in the Dakotas, bomber bases in Missouri, and the obvious political centres like DC and Moscow. You look at that map, find a quiet patch of green in the foothills of Virginia or the plains of Ohio, and you tell yourself, I am safe here. I am away from the blast radius. That assumption is going to get you killed. The map in your head is 40 years out of date. The logic of warfare has shifted from decapitating governments to paralysing systems. In 2026, the target is not just the soldier, it is the server. It is the pipeline, the rail junction, and the cloud storage facility sitting 3 miles from your rural retreat. War planners have moved on from simple city flattening to dissecting the digital and logistical nervous system of the enemy. If you do not understand where the new nerves are located, you are standing in the crosshairs of a war you think you have already outsmarted. Today, we are auditing your location against the reality of modern strategic targeting. We are going to rip up the old FEMA blast charts and overlay the new critical infrastructure map. The hyperscale data centers, the just-in-time logistics hubs, and the fragile energy interconnectors that keep civilization running. We will walk through specific scenarios where safe towns become radioactive slag, not because they house nukes, but because they house the internet. We will look at why living near a container port is now more dangerous than living near the Pentagon. And we will discuss how to actually assess your risk when the target isn't a population centre, but a back-end database. This is not about fear-mongering, it is about updating your threat model to match the century we actually live in. If you want to survive the collapse of the complex systems you depend on, you need to understand how they break. Secure your spot in this curriculum now by paying attention, because the geography of survival has changed. Picture this. It is a Tuesday in late 2026. You live in a semi-rural county, maybe an hour outside a major metro area. You picked this spot specifically because it's boring. There are no military bases, no heavy industry, just rolling hills and some nondescript massive warehouses that have sprung up over the last 5 years. You're sipping coffee when the sky to the east flashes, not with the sound of a bomb, but with the silent, instant death of the power grid. Then comes the rumble. It's a ground burst. Low yield. You aren't vaporized, but the shockwave rattles your windows. You look towards the horizon, confused. Why there? There's nothing there but those quiet, windowless concrete buildings with the heavy air conditioning units. You didn't know that those boring buildings were a hyperscale cloud region hosting the real-time logistics data for the entire Western Seaboard's defense network. You didn't live next to a warehouse, you lived next to the brain of the military-industrial complex. And now, that brain is burning. Most people in this scenario freeze. They try to fit the event into a framework that doesn't exist anymore. They check their phones, which are bricks. They run to the TV, which is black. Their first instinct is to assume it was an accident, a transformer explosion, maybe a chemical spill. They waste the... Let's look at the mechanics of why this happens. Modern militaries run on data. Command and control, drone uplinks, supply chain management, and financial transaction processing for war bonds. It all lives in the cloud. But the cloud is a physical place. It is a building full of hot silicon, drinking water for cooling, and sucking electricity from the grid. Intelligence agencies call these dual-use targets. A server farm hosting civilian emails might also be hosting the backup database for a national energy grid or tactical defense software. In a total war scenario, an adversary doesn't need to nuke the tank factory if they can nuke the server that tells the factory where to ship the parts. These facilities are often clustered in specific geographic pockets due to cheap power and fibre optic access. places like Northern Virginia, parts of Oregon, or Scandinavia. These clusters are dense. A single tactical nuclear strike, or even a massive conventional barrage, can wipe out 30% of a nation's compute capacity instantly. It is a high-reward target with zero civilian population density, making it politically easier to justify striking. Here is the twist specific to the data center strike: the fallout composition. Unlike a city strike, where the debris is concrete and glass, a ground burst on a massive technology park vaporizes tons of exotic heavy metals, backup battery banks, lead and lithium, and industrial coolants. The fallout plume drifting over your safe farm isn't just radioactive, it is a toxic chemical soup. Furthermore, because the goal was to dig out underground bunkers often found beneath these data centers, the weapon used was likely a ground penetrator. This kicks up vastly more earth and dust than an airburst. You are dealing with intense, heavy, local fallout that arrives in minutes, not hours. And the irony? Because the target was digital, the first thing you lose is information. No warnings, no news. You are breathing lead vapor and radioactive dust while staring at a blank screen, wondering why anyone would bomb an empty field. Shift gears. You are hundreds of miles away from the tech corridors. You are in the heartland, a railroad town. It's gritty, industrial, and far from any capital city. You hear the clanking of shunting trains day and night. It's background noise. You feel secure here because who bombs a rail yard in the middle of nowhere? Then the sirens start. Not the air raid sirens, those were disconnected in the 90s. The fire sirens. Then the sky turns white. A tactical nuke has just detonated directly over the intermodal exchange, where 3 major rail lines intersect. The blast wave flattens the rail yard, derails 100 trains, and snaps the spine of the regional logistics network. You aren't near a base. You aren't near a government building. You are near a switch point. And in modern war, stopping the movement of fuel and food is just as effective as killing troops. The residents of the rail town make a fatal calculation error. They assume the strike is the prelude to an invasion or a wider bombing campaign of their homes. They panic flee onto the highways. But the highways are now choked with the debris of the very logistics network that was targeted. Overturned trucks, panicked drivers, and fleeing rail workers. By rushing out into the open, they expose themselves to the thermal pulse of secondary fires. The rail yard was full of hazardous materials: chlorine gas tankers, propane, industrial chemicals. The blast breached them all. The panic creates a gridlock exactly within the drift zone of a chemical cloud released by the strike. They treated it like a nuclear event, ducking and covering, but they ignored the hazmat reality. They die choking in their cars because they didn't understand they were living next to a chemical bomb, waiting for a detonator. This is what military analysts call counter-value targeting applied to infrastructure. In a protracted war, an enemy knows they cannot defeat the United States or NATO in a head-on clash of tanks. They have to starve the beast. That means hitting the joints of the skeleton. A rail hub that connects the East Coast ports to the Midwest factories is a critical joint. A bridge that carries 40% of a region's trucking traffic is a joint. If you destroy these, you don't just stop military supplies, you stop the food delivery to 10 million people. The targeting computers in 2026 prioritize these nodes because they create cascading systemic failure. One warhead here does the work of 10 warheads dropped on spread-out military units. The blast radius is calculated to sever the tracks and collapse the bridges. If you live within 10 miles of a major intermodal facility, an Amazon regional distribution center, or a strategic port, you are living in the splash zone of economic strangulation. The unique complication here is the speed of starvation. In the Cold War, regional warehouses held weeks of grain. Today, we operate on just-in-time delivery. The grocery stores in your town are restocked every 48 hours. When that rail hub is vaporized, the resupply stops instantly. There is no buffer. You are not just dealing with radiation, you are dealing with an immediate, hard stop to the flow of calories. Within 72 hours, every store within a 200-mile radius of that hub is empty. Not just from panic buying, but because the trucks physically cannot be loaded. The safe zone turns into a famine zone faster than you can imagine. Your preparedness plan relies on going to the store one last time before hunkering down. In this scenario, that option is gone before you even know the war has started. Let's move to the coast, or perhaps a corridor in Oklahoma or Texas. You see pipelines, big, silent tubes running through the landscape, punctuated by pumping stations and massive tank farms. It looks industrial, but static, harmless. You are asleep when the high-altitude electromagnetic pulse, HEMP, hits, followed seconds later by kinetic strikes on the pumping stations. The lights don't just go out, the transformers explode. The SCADA systems, the computers that control the pressure in those pipes, fry instantly. Without electronic control, valves seize, pressure builds. In some places, the pipelines rupture explosively. You wake up to a world that is not only dark, but silent. The hum of the electric civilization is gone. But it's the secondary effect that kills you. The water stops. Municipal water towers rely on electric pumps to fill. Without the grid, and without the fuel from the pipelines to run backup generators, the taps run dry in 12 hours. The failed reaction here is focusing on power instead of flow. People obsess over their solar panels and battery banks. They think, I have lights, I'm fine. They forget that their modern life is entirely liquid dependent. They try to drive to their bug-out location, but the gas pumps are dead. The electric chargers are bricks. They are trapped in their driveways. They try to filter water from the creek, but the upstream refinery was hit, and the water is coated in an oil slick. They prepared for a blackout, not a total cessation of fluid dynamics. They possess energy in batteries, but have no way to convert that into mobility or hydration, because the infrastructure that moves those things is physically broken. Strategic warfare targets the transformers, literally. High voltage transformers, HVTs, are the crown jewels of the grid. They are massive, custom-built, and mostly imported. There are no spares sitting in a warehouse. If an adversary destroys a cluster of HVTs and pumping stations, they aren't just turning off the lights for a week. They are turning them off for 18 months. The targeting logic is simple. Disable the enemy's ability to project power. A tank without fuel is a bunker. A fighter jet without Jet A1 is a museum piece. By hitting the refining and distribution nodes, an enemy paralyzes the military. You, the civilian, are collateral damage in this energy siege. The safe zone map usually ignores these pipelines and substations, yet they are the most fragile links in the chain. A nuclear airburst aimed at a refinery cluster creates a firestorm that consumes oxygen and fuel for miles, creating a localized weather system of heat and smoke. The specific complication of energy targeting is the fire loop. When refineries and tank farms are hit, they don't just burn out, they burn for weeks, spewing black, oily, carcinogenic smoke that blots out the sun. This smoke lowers local temperatures, creating a mini nuclear winter effect regionally, while simultaneously polluting every open water source with hydrocarbons. If you are downwind of a major energy hub, your solar panels are useless because of the smoke. Your rain catchment is toxic because of the soot. Your garden is dying from lack of light and chemical burns. You survived the blast, but you are now living in an ecological dead zone. The safe rural distance meant nothing because the atmosphere itself has been weaponized by the burning infrastructure. So you go deep. You buy a cabin in the Rockies or the Appalachians, miles from anything. No data centers, no pipelines, no rail hubs, just trees and deer. You feel smug. You have won the game. Then the war starts. You don't see a flash. You don't hear a bang. You turn on your shortwave radio to get news and you hear nothing. Just static. You check your GPS to see if the satellites are still up. Dead. You wait for the fallout, checking your Geiger counter. It clicks up, but not to lethal levels. You are alive. But then winter comes, and you realize the flaw in your plan. You are the only one with food. And the desperate masses from the cities didn't die, they migrated. They followed the same roads you did. You look down your driveway and see not a military convoy, but a station wagon running on rims, followed by 100 people on foot. The threat isn't the bomb anymore, it's the map. The hermit's failed reaction is assuming that remote equals invisible. In the digital age, everyone knows where the remote places are. They are on Instagram. They are on real estate blogs titled Best Bug Out Locations. When the cities become uninhabitable due to grid failure, not even radiation, just sewage and water failure, the population flows outward like water. They follow the path of least resistance. If you are on a road that leads to safety, you are on a refugee corridor. The hermit tries to defend a static position against a mobile, desperate swarm. They think a rifle and a fence are enough. They underestimate the sheer hydraulic pressure of 1 million starving people moving away from a dying city. You cannot shoot a tidal wave. Let's do the calorie math. A human being can walk about 20 miles a day on empty. A city of 2 million people holds about 3 days of food. When the grid dies, that clock starts. By day 5, panic sets in. By day 7, they move. If only 10% of that population survives the initial chaos and decides to walk, that is 200,000 people radiating outward in a 360-degree wave. Your remote cabin 100 miles away is exactly within the 5-day walking radius of a starving urban centre. The safe zone maps often look at blast radius, but ignore the desperation radius. Historically, during famines and collapses, people strip the countryside bare like locusts. They eat the livestock, the seed corn, and the pets. The target map you should be worried about is the population density map. If you are connected by asphalt to a population centre, you are not remote. You are just at the end of the line. Here creates the darkest complication. International humanitarian law protects civilians, but it allows for attacks on infrastructure that contributes to military action. This includes highways and bridges used for potential military movement. If your remote area is serviced by a highway that the military might use to reposition reserves, an enemy might drop a bridge or mine a pass to deny that route. You aren't the target, but your only road out is. Now you are trapped. You can't leave, and the supplies can't get in. You are besieged in your own sanctuary. Furthermore, in a total collapse, the rule of law evaporates. The refugees aren't just families. They are gangs, remnants of police forces, and military deserters who have the weapons and the training to take what you have. Your isolation prevents you from forming a community defence. You die alone because you mistook solitude for safety. So, does a safe zone exist? Or is it all just varying degrees of doom? The answer lies not in finding a magic spot on a map, but in auditing your reality. Let's simulate a proper audit. You step out onto your porch. You don't look at the trees, you look at the wires. Where do they go? You look at the train tracks. What is on the cars? Is it coal? Is it tanks? Is it grain? You check the local industrial park. Who rents that space? Is it a carpet warehouse? Or is it a subsidiary of Raytheon? You are becoming an intelligence officer for your own life. You realise that safety isn't a place, it's a situational awareness. You stop trusting the generic nuclear map of the USA you saw on Reddit and start drawing your own, based on what is physically around you. The failure mode here is denial. People do this audit, find a massive risk factor, like a chemical plant or a data centre, and then ignore it because moving is hard. They say, well, surely they won't bomb that, or the government will protect it. This is normalisation bias. It is the psychological mechanism that keeps you in your seat when the fire alarm rings. You rationalise the danger away to avoid the inconvenience of action. You buy more canned beans instead of planning an evacuation route that avoids the chemical plant. You reinforce your basement against fallout, but ignore the fact that you live in a floodplain that will overflow when the dam upstream loses power. You prepare for the threat you want, not the threat you have. Here is how you actually build a survival map. Step 1. Identify the attractors. These are military bases, yes, but also airports with runways longer than 8,000 feet, capable of handling heavy military transport, ports, rail yards, and major power generation stations. Draw a 10-mile circle around them. That is your primary danger zone. Step 2. Identify the dependents. These are data centres, hospitals, and government hubs. They will be targeted by cyber or EMP attacks first. Step 3. Overlay the wind. In the Northern Hemisphere, prevailing winds generally move west to east. Are you east of a target? You are in the fallout cone. Step 4. Look for choke points. Bridges, tunnels, mountain passes. If these are destroyed, are you trapped? If the answer is yes, you need a pre-positioned cache of supplies on the other side of that choke point. This isn't paranoia, it's civil engineering. It's understanding the flow of materials and energy and positioning yourself where the flow is least likely to be violently interrupted. The final complication is that the map changes. In 2026, war is dynamic. An empty warehouse today becomes a drone assembly plant tomorrow. A civilian highway becomes a main supply route, MSR. Mobile missile launchers hide in national parks. Your safe zone can become a target overnight based on troop movements. You cannot draw a map once and forget it. You must stay plugged in. You need to monitor local news for new construction projects. Why are they digging that massive trench for fibre optics? Why is the National Guard reinforcing that bridge? These are clues. The battlefield is fluid. If you are rigid in your thinking, you will be caught off guard. The survivor of the future is adaptable, constantly re-evaluating their position relative to the shifting infrastructure of war. So, where does this leave you? If every place is a target, is nowhere safe? No, it means you must redefine safety. Safety is not a fortress, it is a capacity to endure. Instead of looking for a place where nothing bad happens, you build a life that can function when the bad things happen. You install a gravity-fed water system because you know the pumps will fail. You learn to treat burns and dysentery because you know the hospital is gone. You build a community network with your neighbours, farmers, mechanics, nurses, because you know the federal government isn't coming. You stop trying to hide from the world and start trying to outlast the breakage of the world. You accept that the grid will die, the internet will vanish, and the supply chain will snap. And you say, okay, we can work with that. The ultimate prep is redundancy. If you rely on one location, one fuel source, or one escape route, you are fragile. The Nuclear Target Map of 2026 is designed to exploit fragility. It breaks the single points of failure. To counter this, you must be decentralised, store water in multiple places, have a plan A, B, and C for shelter. Learn skills that don't require electricity. The enemy targets the complex, high-tech, centralised systems. You defeat them by becoming simple, low-tech, and distributed. They can nuke a data centre. They cannot nuke 1,000 people who know how to grow potatoes and purify water in a bucket. That is the one target map they cannot saturate. The resilience of the human spirit, armed with the right knowledge and simple tools, is the only true safe zone. Let's finalise your action plan. Don't move house tomorrow. Instead, harden where you are. 1. Water independence. If the municipal pipes dry up or become toxic, can you harvest rain? Do you have a filter that handles chemicals, not just bacteria? 2. Information independence. Get a ham radio. Learn to listen. When the internet dies, the radio waves will be the only truth left. 3. Thermal independence. If the gas line is cut, can you heat one room? Do you have wool blankets and a wood stove? 4. Community integration. Who are your neighbours? If you don't know them, you are already dead. A lone wolf is just a loot drop for a squad. Build alliances now. Trade vegetables for mechanical work. Create a web of mutual reliance that replaces the global supply chain on a micro scale. This is how you vanish from the target map. You become too small to target, but too resilient to break. The hardest part of this solution is the mental load. Living with the knowledge that the infrastructure around you is a house of cards is exhausting. It creates anxiety. The complication is that you must prepare without letting the preparation consume your life. You have to enjoy the Tuesday coffee, even while knowing the data centre next door is a target. You have to plant the garden, even knowing the fallout might one day poison it. This is the paradox of the survivor. You must be fully aware of the horror, yet fully committed to the beauty of living. If you let the fear paralyse you, the enemy has already won without launching a single missile. Your mind is the final terrain. Fortify it with stoicism and action, not panic. The map is not the territory. The map is a lie we tell ourselves to feel control over chaos. In 2026, the chaos is baked into the system. The targets are everywhere because the system is everywhere. But here is the thing about systems. They can be rebuilt. If you are still standing when the smoke clears, you get to decide what the new map looks like. You get to draw the lines. But that only happens if you survive the interval, the dark gap between the old world breaking and the new one starting. That gap is where the real curriculum begins. We have covered the targets. Next, we need to talk about the timeline of the collapse itself. What happens in hour 1 versus hour 100. If you want to know how to navigate the specific timeline of a grid-down scenario, you need to be here for the next briefing. Secure your spot now. You survived the simulation. Now survive the reality. Equip yourself at the official supply depot. Because if the world is going to end, you might as well look prepared.